Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Garbage Time Takes. Dennis, I don't know if we're gonna call this a true episode or not. We've been waiting to try and put episode 50 together. You had some absences come up the past couple weeks that pushed us back, and then Bob getting a last-minute ticket to Morgan Wallen tonight took him out of the picture. Um, Dennis, do we call this episode 50 or what do we do?
I have it in my notes as episode 49/50 because I was going to ask you the same question. And I think that, maybe this is just some sort of ghost episode. I don't know. We could put it under the, just kind of like a recap or like catching up to speed
Right.
episode as
That's
just its own category.
that's what I was thinking. Maybe like episode 49 and 2/3, since only two out of the three of us.
49.2.
Yeah, 49 and 2/3, since 2/3 of the group is here. More of a recap video than an actual podcast episode.
Derek, I would I would just absolutely love nothing more than to sit here and spend the first, I don't know, 5, 6 minutes of this episode and give our good friend Bobby Epler a load of crap
Correct.
for his absence tonight. However, I am not in a position to do so. So, I was kind of hoping that maybe you would be able to, just do a little bit on my behalf because
Sure, sure, sure.
there's just a lot of reasons in which I'm not really in a spot to be able to do that.
Correct. So the reason Dennis is not allowed to really say anything is because 2 weeks ago he was 2 weeks ago the bachelor party, Dennis?
No, that was last week.
Oh, that was last week. What was 2 weeks
That was
ago?
last week. Oh gosh, man. Nashville.
Yes, Nashville.
Nashville.
Yes,
We're in
Dennis.
Nashville.
Dennis
Yep.
was out living it up in the streets of Nashville, getting litty, listening to country music, having a grand old time. That pushed us back a week for episode 50. And then last week, Dennis had a bachelor party to attend to. That pushed us back another week. And then Dennis said Thursday. The reason why this is going up in what'll essentially be Saturday morning
Yes.
Eastern time.
Literally the entire week was fine, and then oh my gosh.
Correct. So Dennis said on thank you to Dennis. He texted us on Monday and said, "Heads up, I will not be able to do a podcast again this Thursday due to moving Anna back to GR. Can we do it Wednesday or Friday?" And I was busy Wednesday. Bob said Friday would work best. And here we are on Friday, and Bob's not even here, Dennis. Bob is not even here
You
the
know,
day he said would work best for him, because he's just too lucky. He's too lucky. He had a Morgan
yeah,
Wallen ticket fall right into his lap, and here we are, where we said we'd be on a Friday night, Saturday morning now for you at 12:45 Eastern on a Saturday morning. But nonetheless, Bob nowhere to be seen.
yeah, it's the truth. And that's one main reason I can't say anything. The other main reason is that if I had a Morgan Wallen ticket fall into my lap, I would probably be there as well. So and you can go ahead and get rid of the probably. I would be there. So, Bobby, I hope it's enjoyable. I can't wait to catch up and hear all about it. And maybe at some point this calendar year we will get episode 50 in because that'd be pretty great,
I
I
would
would
hope.
say.
Dennis, are you going to be busy next Thursday? Do we have an open date next Thursday finally?
Well, actually, here's the thing. So I'll give you a little preview of this right now, Derek, on the pod. Next
Okay.
weekend, me and Big Boy, I'm sorry, my apologies. Me and my brother Wyatt. So hopefully, if you're listening to this, Wyatt, no offense. We are going to Milwaukee, Wisconsin on Friday night for the Reds Brewers game,
Okay.
and then we're taking this short trip downstate or into northern Illinois to watch the Sunday round of the John Deere Classic
Oh,
on
very
Sunday. And
cool.
so it's going to be a little bit of a brothers weekend. And I'm at this point thinking I might be traveling there Thursday. However, by the time that we record, I would be in a hotel room of
Mm.
sorts. And so I might be able to make it work slash guest appearance. I mean, I don't know.
Oh,
You might get two of us. I don't know. I don't know.
maybe. Dennis, it truly is amazing that throughout your master's degree pursuit, you were open basically every Thursday night, and then you got
Yeah.
your master's, and now you're never available on Thursday nights.
Well, I know, this is not to self-incriminate myself further, but I think it is worth noting. you mentioned the last 2 weeks. Before that, we were able to get an episode in, which
We
is
were
which was a great episode. But if you go back before that, I believe I missed 2 or 3 weeks before that and was catching some crap.
correct.
So it's been a rough stretch, and because I was listening to one of those episodes not too long ago, and Bobby mentioned how I had no school and no job and got busier. Well,
Correct.
unfortunately, I do now have a job. I am now working
You're now
full
working
time.
man.
That's right.
Yeah, I just pulled it up on my screen since I've got the recording software and pointed out how uh, before our last episode you had missed the previous 2 weeks. And had me and Bob done podcasts, you would have missed an incredible stretch of 4 out of 5 weeks, Dennis.
Yeah, it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. We're getting to the point where and I think I mentioned this the last time I was actually on was you guys are going to start calling me a guest. So I'm glad that I've hopefully salvaged that status at least
I
for
think
now. That'd be pretty disastrous, I would say.
that it would, but yes, I do think at least for this week you've ingratiated yourself once again. Fortunately for you, Dennis, it has been 3 weeks since our last pod. There has been an absolute crap ton of sports stuff that has happened since our last podcast. So much so that I
There
don't
has.
actually remember what we had talked about prior to the last
I know,
episode.
I know.
So fortunately, we did our due diligence and messaged each other about some
Mhm.
topics that we believe are somewhat current events. So I guess we can just start with. Do we want to start with old news or breaking news, Dennis?
I would say, I mean, I don't know. All the meetings I've sat in on, you hit the old news first. So
All
maybe
right,
let's start there.
let's hit the old news first. We'll start in the golf world, Dennis, just because that's the easiest thing to do. Let's go
It is.
all the way back to the week after we had done our last pod. And that would have been
Okay.
for the US Open. Is that correct?
Yep.
And
I
Rory.
was debating. I didn't know. Did we talk about the memorial at all? Or
I don't believe. When was the memorial?
the week before the US Open. It was Victor Hovland. Victor
We
Hovland
did.
won the
We
memorial.
did not talk about the memorial.
Okay. I mean, it's one of those tournaments just briefly. It's a little odd. I think it used to be 2 weeks before the US Open, which made more sense because it's a little odd. It's the week before. A lot of times players will take off the week before,
Mm,
but the memorial is kind of like the players, where it's kind of this like minor major, like sub major. It's
the
not one of
fifth
the four
major.
majors, but yeah, if the fifth major is probably the players, the sixth would be the
Okay.
memorial.
Okay.
Um, and it's hosted at Jack Nicklaus's course in Columbus, Ohio. And he always has it in really good shape. He's always there and presents the trophy and all the stuff that goes along with that. But that was a good tournament. And then we had, of course, the US Open right
And
after that, which was at LA Country Club.
Dennis, there was a lot of talk going into there that maybe Max Homa could finally win a major, going
Dude, I
back to
know.
his quote unquote home course. I think he'd played there like once in college or something and had done really well, and so everyone called it his home course. Um, but Rory McIlroy, Dennis, could not get a putt to fall. Just could not get a
Nope.
putt to fall. Definitely, in my mind, wins that tournament if he can just literally get one single putt, Dennis. One single putt to fall. Couldn't get it. He's, he's getting pretty close now, Dennis, to 10 years. A full decade since his last major. Um, what are your thoughts on the way the U.S. Open went and Rory McIlroy's unfortunate runner-up finish?
I didn't watch as much of it as I would have liked to. Surprise, surprise, because I believe that would have been Nashville weekend.
Correct.
However, I was keeping up with scores, updates, and push notifications and whatnot. Shout out Wyndham Clark. I think that there's credit to be had there, and more on him later. But the inability of Roy McIlroy to make a putt, as you mentioned, and if I'm not mistaken, there were a lot of names at the top of that leaderboard Saturday and Sunday. I mean, I believe Scotty was there. I think a couple of the live guys were there.
Scotty, Cam
Ricky
Smith.
Fowler,
Yep, Ricky Fowler
Cam
was up
Smith.
there for quite some time. Minwoo Lee was up there. Tommy Fleetwood
Ricky
was up
Fowler
there.
was didn't he set the or tie the course record on
I think
Friday
so.
or
I
something with like a 60?
Yeah, something super insane. Yes, I believe so.
Crazy.
And then he unfortunately went +5 on that Sunday and just completely
Yeah,
fell
and he
off.
did. Yeah, it was a Sunday of falling apart. Ricky Fowler, though, side note, T3 right now at the Rocket Mortgage over in Detroit.
Detroit,
T3
Detroit.
heading into the weekend. So, hopefully I'm a big Ricky guy. I've always liked Ricky and it's kind of fun to see him back on the map, so to speak. So hopefully he can finally get that win because it's still eluding him at this point. But I thought it was a good US Open. I mean, the US Open format is always super interesting, or I should say the setup, because the courses are just impossible.
Right.
And for lack of a better word, stupid sometimes. And I think you heard some of the frustration throughout the week from the players in that regard. But it does produce some entertaining content because I mean, what Wyndham he finished 10 under
Yeah.
for the whole tournament, I think, and that was pretty good scoring. So it's it's always a super hard setup, and this year was no different. A lot was made about that par three. Did you see the par three where they were having to essentially lay up from like 120 yards or something like
That's
that?
crazy. I did not see that.
Because it was essentially tucked into such a like tight corner that going after the flag would have been an absolute like train wreck,
Gotcha.
um, like disaster. um, with like trees on one side, water, bunkers. It was like a ridiculous setup. But that's what you get from US Open, and I don't think there's too much more to be said about that.
Yeah, I mean, it was quite the contrast going from the US Open to the following week was the Travelers
The Travelers, yeah,
when the
it's a great
winner
event.
finished like 20. I was just looking at it. 23 under. Keegan Bradley won the
Yep,
Travelers
Keegan Bradley, baby.
Championship with a 23 under. Um, Zach Blair made a run for it with an 8 under on Sunday. I mean, Dennis, you just go from the course winning the U.S. Open. We root for the course. I know Bob, even though he's not here, he's a big fan of the course. Uh, the course won the U.S. Open, and then the course got absolutely obliterated in the Travelers.
Yeah, and actually, believe it or not, the Travelers, that's an event I've been to.
Okay,
And it's over in Cromwell, Connecticut, which is not too far from Boston. Um, but the really cool thing about that, I don't know if you knew this, but Keegan Bradley is essentially from that town. He's from like 30 minutes away from
okay,
Cromwell, Connecticut. And so I remember he always plays in the Travelers. And when I was there a few years ago, we went on Sunday. He was like 7 or 8 strokes off the lead. So he went off in the morning, but he had a following. Like he was definitely the
okay.
hometown favorite. And so I'm sure that they were really, really happy up there in the Northeast this weekend when he was able to get it done because I don't think he's ever actually won there before.
No, I was listening to something earlier, and the last time he was in a position to win, it was actually against the same guy he ended up beating, who was in his final pairing, Ches Reavie. Uh, in
Yep,
tw-
Ches Reavie.
in 2019, it was him and
That's the year I was
Ches.
there.
Okay, yeah, so it was him and Ches coming down the stretch, and Ches eked him out by a stroke, I believe. And then this
Okay.
year, Ches was in the final grouping with him again, and this time, Keegan was able to take that one. Uh, Dennis, one last thing on golf. I know you wanted to talk some live golf stuff too, but as I was just breezing through some of the standings as we were talking about some of these events. Is it free money to take Scotty Scheffler top 5 finish every time he golfs? Because
Oh my
at
gosh,
every
man.
single event he's played that I looked at in the past 6 or 7 events, he is consistently top 5.
Yeah, here's the dude just competes. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I'm pulling up the numbers right now, but I have no reason to doubt.
S-
what you just said because
So going
it's
back,
been like that all year. It's been like that all year.
yeah, going to the AT&T
That's
Byron
crazy.
Nelson, May 11th, he finished
Oh my
tied for
gosh.
5th. At the PGA Championship, he finished tied for 2nd. At the Charles Schwab, that's a tongue twister, he finished tied for 3rd. At the Memorial, he finished 3rd. I don't believe he played the Canadian Open because I don't see him in the top 50, and that would be very surprising if he didn't finish top 50. At the U.S.
Let me tell you this.
At the U.S. Open, he finished 3rd. At the Travelers, he finished tied for 4th.
He hasn't finished worse than T12 this calendar year.
Dennis, it sounds like we've been missing out on free money to take Scotty Scheffler top 10 finish.
Well, I mean, it's free money. However, the books are not they're not stupid. They have it priced as such.
Correct.
So, I mean, most of these tournaments that he starts, I've seen some ridiculous numbers in terms of outright betting for Scotty Scheffler to win tournaments like plus 600, which in golf, if you're not familiar with betting odds, that's asinine.
Correct.
That's like Tiger Woods in his prime levels of odds to win a golf tournament. The
Correct.
general rule of thumb is you never take an individual less than plus 1,000. And Scotty Scheffler comes in some weeks at plus 600, 650. But taking that top 10, it's automatic. It's
Automatic.
automatic.
Yeah, yeah, quite literally automatic. Dennis, you mentioned to me when we were texting before that there has been so much live golf stuff going on. What exactly has been going on in the live golf world, Dennis?
Well, didn't we cover this on the last episode a little bit or no?
Yeah, yeah, we did. Okay, so it was just
Because
talking about that, just about the whole live
yeah, because
golf.
yeah, nothing's really happened since then. I think at least
That is
in what
correct.
I've heard, everything is settled down a little bit. We talked about Max Homa a little bit earlier. I thought it was really funny because right before the US Open, Max, I mean, he's a character. He likes to get on Twitter and throw his stuff out there. I think some of his stuff is pretty funny. And he had said essentially preview of my US Open press conferences this weekend. And then it was Max, you're from this area. You grew up in Southern California. You play these courses all the time. I mean, it's got to be exciting to be back home. My question is, what do you think about the PGA and Live Golf merger? So nothing to do with golf itself, and
Correct.
that's kind of how it felt. But the last couple of weeks, I think we've gotten back to the groove of actually, caring about the tournaments, which is always a good thing to see. For the remainder of this year, I think it's kind of flown by. I'll say that. I mean, three majors are done.
Correct.
Uh, we've we've got the Open. That would be the British Open here in a couple weeks later in July, and then after that it's the wind down of the PGA Tour season, the FedEx Cup playoffs, and then you've got the Ryder Cup. So, um, yeah, it's kind of crazy to me.
Yeah, yeah, it did all just kind of, it was big news for a week, and then now it's sort of been back to your regularly scheduled TV programming with the golf
Well,
world.
I think we're going to hear a lot about it. Maybe not necessarily the rest of this summer, but certainly into the fall and the winter because it's going to need to be decided on what this looks like next year. I'm under the impression, at least, that this is going to be something that more or less takes effect next spring. So they're going to have to start releasing some news on what things are going to look like.
Correct. Dennis, switching gears into a sports world that you managed to become quite familiar with a couple weeks ago, the Gold Cup, Dennis. USA
That's right.
Soccer, in the Gold Cup, you were there to see them take on Jamaica, I believe. What was
That's
Dennis?
correct.
What was that atmosphere like? Because I have to imagine it was electric.
It was. It was one of the more electric and energized sporting events I've ever been able to attend in person. It was really cool. I mean, you just walking in, through the tunnel, you've got the USA chants going. Um, but to be fair as well, there was representation from Jamaica and fans of the Jamaican squad, so it was cool to be there on both sides. And obviously, as we were kind of messaging about before the podcast, they didn't roll out the USA, didn't roll out their A lineup by any
Correct.
means, and then you end up drawing, which is
One of the
I don't know.
most one of the most anticlimactic finishes in sports,
Yes,
the soccer draw.
correct, correct. After going down 1-0, 1-0, I guess is correct. Fairly early in the
Correct.
game, not getting too many real chances, and then scoring in like the 81st minute, which was pretty cool, I would say, to be able to tie it up
The
in
88th
the
minute,
in late in the
Dennis.
game, late in the match. 88th minute. Oh my gosh, I
Yeah.
didn't even realize it was that late.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Like you were saying, because the U.S. the A team had just finished playing in the Concacaf Nations League, where we were victorious. We took down. Excuse me. We took down Canada 2-0 in the Concacaf Nations League final. We had previously taken out Mexico 3-0 in the semifinal because Mexico sucks. And then, of course, Dennis, the U.S.'s next match after Jamaica, they blew St. Kitts and Nevis out 6-0, just clapped them up and smoked that St. Kitts and Nevis pack. And then this coming Sunday, July 2nd, it'll be USA and Trinidad and Tobago to cap off the group
always
stage.
dangerous,
Always, I'm pretty sure
always
if
dangerous.
I remember my U.S. soccer history right, was it not Trinidad and Tobago who knocked the U.S. out of World Cup qualifying 8 years ago?
I think it might have been. I think, there was a few rumblings as because, I'm not the most learned individual when it comes to um soccer stuff, but I know there were some rumblings with the group I was with that Trinidad and Tobago might have been a bigger threat to us than Jamaica before the game,
Yeah, it's
before the match. And then we ended up drawing with Jamaica and we're like, uh-oh.
yes, I was right. So, uh, Trinidad and Tobago won 2-1, which resulted in the United States missing their first World Cup since 1986. That was in 2017, so 6 years ago, before the 2018 World Cup qualifying, or the 2018 World Cup. So I was right. My U.S. soccer history did not fail me. The TNT knocked the U.S. out of World Cup qualifying a mere 6 years ago, Dennis. And look where we are now. I think I
Wow.
saw something that said U.S. soccer is ranked 11th in the world, I believe, which is
Hey,
quite the step from missing qualification due to losing to Trinidad and Tobago. No disrespect.
correct. No, 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 no disrespect at all. I think that's all very fair and accurate. Yeah. So it was to circle back, it was a really cool environment. I'm glad I got to go. It was at oh my gosh, I'm completely blanking. I am
Soldier Field.
Soldier Field. Soldier Field. I was about to say the Bears Stadium and I know the name of it. Soldier Field, which is not a stadium I had been able to be at before.
Okay,
So it's pretty cool to just check out the stadium as well.
absolutely. We're getting closer to modern times in sports news recaps. LSU, Dennis, did you get a chance to watch much of the College World Series? Because I was able to. Uh, the LSU versus Wake Forest series wrapped up when I got home. And then I was able to watch all three games of the actual final. It was electric. Unfortunately, game three wasn't nearly as exciting as some of the other games. In
Yep.
fact, game two and game three both just absolute blowouts from almost start to finish for both games. A far cry from what game one was, with the walk-off homer to seal it. Did you get a chance to watch much of it,
So
Dennis?
I did not get a chance to watch much of it, only a little bit from the bars in between on Friday and Saturday. So why don't you give a bit of a recap and then I'll weigh in after that.
Okay, sure. Let me pull up just because it's been so long now. Um, So it was LSU and it was Florida, and unfortunately, it was an all SEC final. I was rooting for Wake Forest. Unfortunately, they gave up a walk-off homer in the winner go home semifinal game. So game one, just to briefly recap, was pretty awesome. Um, I'm just trying to pull it up here. That was game three. Please show me game one. This is excellent podcasting. Here we go. So game one was a 4-3 finish. The game went 11 innings, and it was sealed with. Actually, I don't think it was a walk-off homer. I think Florida was the home team in that one. But that was easily the most exciting game of the World Series final, I should say. Because in game two, Florida responded with a 24 to 4 victory. They scored 24 runs on 23 hits in an absolute
Oh my gosh.
yeah, it
Oh
was
my gosh.
yeah, 24 to 4. It was insane. I didn't watch much of that game naturally because it was a blowout. Just was checking the box score every so often. And then in game 3, LSU responded and scored 18 runs on 24 hits and beat Florida 18 to 4. So a rather anticlimactic World Series final, but I have to give LSU a little bit of respect. Their manager, Coach Johnson, was the manager for U of A baseball, actually. Took U of A to two College World Series finals. Unfortunately, they were not able to win any of them. And unfortunately, those SEC paychecks hit a little bit bigger than the Pac 12 paycheck. So unfortunately, he was not able to lead us to a national championship. But congratulations to them. Congratulations to LSU. A lot of MLB talent on that LSU team. You may have seen Dennis. Um, Paul Skeen's name come up quite a bit during the last week or so. Um, a guy who you'll likely see on your TV screens as an MLB pitcher at some point. Dude is electric, got crazy stuff, and yeah, LSU. I guess they just win, Dennis. They won the women's college basketball
Okay.
championship, and now they win the World Series. SEC won the football national championship. I mean, there's something to
I
be
was gonna say,
said. There's something to be said about, at least for baseball, having near perfect weather year round.
I mean, there's no doubt about that. I was just gonna say, I know a couple guys that LSU has churned out that are pretty talented, just saying. So yeah, I, I consider myself a bit of I don't even know what the word for that would be. And I'm not an LSU fan per se, but I have nothing against
An,
LSU at the same time. They
maybe an LSU
that's
admirer of an
admirer.
admirer of
Yeah.
LSU talent for some of your
I
favorite
mean,
sports teams.
I mean, here's the thing. Anybody who's going to employ Coach O has got a check mark in my book. I mean,
Correct. Correct.
that guy's just a legend.
Correct. But yeah, that's really all I got for the College World Series. Um, do we want to talk baseball, or do we want to talk the ESPN layoffs, or do we want to talk NBA free agency?
Well, those last two are going to be much more controlled
Current.
by you with some chiming in.
Okay.
So whatever
You'll.
you want to
I
go.
think. I think you'll have some talk on the ESPN layoffs because there's a lot of names you're gonna recognize, Dennis. So we'll go. We'll go. Well, let's talk about the NFL gambling
So yeah,
suspensions. We'll talk NFL
okay.
gambling, then we'll talk NBA free agency, then we'll talk ESPN layoffs, and then we'll revel in the fact that our baseball teams are performing much better um, than they were about a month ago. So yeah, start off with the NFL gambling suspensions. Let me pull it up real quick because I don't have all the names in front of me.
How could you? There's like a million of them.
Correct. Um, okay, here we go. Isaiah Rodgers
It,
and Rashad Berry of the Indianapolis Colts. Demetrius Taylor, who I believe was released by the Lions right before the draft started. So they must have had an inkling into him also being suspended indefinitely when the first wave of Lions players were all suspended a few months back. And then Nicholas Petit Frere of the Tennessee Titans has also been suspended. But the big news was Isaiah Rodgers being suspended. At least one of his bets was rushing yards over under for his team, and I know you're all wondering, he did hit the bet. We don't know if he took the over or the under on the rushing yards, but what we do know is his bet did hit. Um, so yeah, any thoughts on NFL gambling, Dennis?
uh, I got two words for you, Derek. I got two words for you. They're Pete and Rose. I mean, eh, I the NFL is it's just super interesting to me because they're trying to take a very it seems like they're trying to take a very hard, firm stance here, which I understand why, and I understand the importance of doing so. However, it still feels as though that they've defined the line in a very gray fashion to me. Um, because I mean, to my knowledge, nobody has been banned indefinitely from the sport of football.
Um, Only for gambling.
No, no, nobody. The NFL has not yet banned someone for life.
Oh, for life. No, not for life. Yeah, they've not been banned for life, but
We had the 1 year suspension, I believe it was, for Calvin Ridley, who's coming back this year.
correct.
And then we've had some of these, and the stupid one, at least in my opinion, and I'm sure you'd love to elaborate, would be the Detroit Lions for at the facility on completely different sports,
Correct. That
which
one hurts.
is
It hurts.
absolutely ridiculous. But the problem is if you just say, okay, well, that's okay, and then now how do you monitor what they actually are betting on is just very blurry, I think, in their view, and they just want to get rid of all of it, which I suppose is logical to some extent. However, if you really want to get rid of it, you got to ban somebody for life, apparently.
Yeah, I guess so.
Just ask the MLB
Yep. Yep.
because of
I was just gonna say, the NFL. I don't know if you saw this. This was earlier a couple weeks ago. The NFL did release. Um, I'll call it their revamped gambling education bullet points. I don't know if you saw that. Um,
no, I didn't. I missed that.
Yeah, so here are the six of the main points that will be taught to all incoming rookies in the gambling portion. Rule number one: don't bet on the NFL. Period. Easy enough. Number two:
It's pretty simple.
don't have someone place a bet for you. Pretty, pretty straightforward. Number three: don't gamble at your team facility stadium while traveling for a road game or staying at a team hotel. So they've now made that rule very clear because I know when Jameson Williams got suspended, he was like, I didn't even know that I wasn't allowed to do that. So the NFL said, let's make it very clear for everyone. Rule number four, Dennis: don't share team inside information. Seems like that's not something people would do in general, but maybe players are giving their family members inside scoops on injuries or something before the betting lines get adjusted. Who knows? Number five: don't enter a sports book during the NFL playing season. Seems reasonable enough. And then last: don't play daily fantasy football. So daily fantasy football for cash is
Um,
also outlawed.
uh,
So yeah, those are. Uh, I I will not say credit to the NFL because it feels like this is something that should have been laid out much clearer earlier. Um, but I'm glad to see they are making a very clear, concise effort to make it as clear as possible to the players what the gambling rules are.
No, I agree with you. And bear in mind, what I'm about to say next is not a
Here we go.
it's not a suggestion. It's not a suggestion that they should just allow whatever by any
Okay,
means.
okay,
However, I do struggle a bit with the enforcement of some of these rules,
okay,
particularly having someone place a bet for you.
okay.
Because how are you proving that? It how are you proving that?
Unless
I
unless they're gonna subpoena for text
unless your friend who
messages.
bet. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's true. I was just about, I guess that's true.
Yeah,
It's like if, unless your friend who you just told to place the bet for you is gonna stab you in the back and turn on you and turn you into the
right.
NFL for no reason, uh, there's just gonna be a loophole. And I think it's just gonna happen and the NFL has to accept it. But I do agree with the fact that it's good that they're laying out a framework because the last case scenario or the worst case scenario, the last thing you want to see is that the actual game outcomes get impacted by some sort of eventual gambling situation, scandal, etc. That's
Correct,
really a
correct.
disaster. So that's what they're trying to hedge off, and hopefully they're effective at doing so.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I mean it's pretty clear to be a pretty like it's a very minor issue gambling in the NFL unless these guys are somehow I mean anyone who's betting on NFL games would be having to bet through their friends because I don't know if you saw this. DraftKings or FanDuel or all of them, if they see the player's name come up, they will rat you out. So it's not like
Oh yeah.
cuz you're required to give your GPS when you place a bet
Yep.
and you I'm pretty sure I don't know if you're legally required to use your legal name, but I feel like if it's not it should be. Um but
Well,
there's
you have to link a bank account.
correct.
And so I'm assuming they're getting information from that because unless you have a fake name on your bank accounts,
Correct.
it's going to be kind of tough.
Yeah. So yeah, all I know is that when red flags come up in the gambling operations, they report those findings to the NFL, and that's how the NFL is able to come pretty swiftly down on some of these guys. But again, pretty simple. Don't bet on the NFL if you're an NFL player. Just don't gamble in general during the NFL season. Any other time, you're probably good. Just don't bet on the
All I'm,
NFL and the NFL season. And when you do place a bet, do it from home.
yeah. I mean, the only thing I point out is there's just things that are going to fall through the cracks, and that's just how it's going to be.
Yeah, yeah,
Hopefully it doesn't become too big of an issue. And maybe I'm wrong. I obviously, the bigger sports books especially have all of that data, and it's a good thing that they're able to have the technology to flag those sorts of things and report it to the NFL and other sports organizations. But it's just
do we need to let Pete in?
yes, we do need to let Pete in. That's the ultimate point. As always, that's the ultimate point. But I've unfortunately, I also have to take a bit of a honest, reflective perspective on that particular issue and say he hasn't necessarily helped his case in the last 5, 6 years
True.
with the things that he's gotten involved in and et cetera, et cetera. Not that that devalidifies or makes his arg makes the argument for him being in the Hall of Fame no longer valid because I still think everything should be based on his actual produce um, production as a player. That is, however, it's all about image at some extent when you're trying to get into the Baseball Hall of Fame at this point in your career. We've talked about players' reputations and how they are viewed by the media, et cetera, mattering, and he has not helped himself.
Put Pete in, dang it. Put Pete in. Isn't he a spokesperson for some gambling organization?
He was. I don't think he is anymore. I
Okay.
think he kind of stepped down from that. He had literally started his own like gambling consulting
That's
company
what it
like 2 years
was.
ago.
That's what it was. Yes,
I
yes.
forget what he called it, but he basically owned and operated a gambling advice giving
What a guy.
entity.
What a
Yeah.
guy.
And not the beginning of this year, and maybe he was onto something, not to do too much foreshadowing. He placed the
That's
first
right.
official bet in Ohio on the Cincinnati Reds to win the World Series.
That's right. That's right. What a legend.
He was onto something, maybe.
You
He was
know,
onto something.
you can never fall. You can never question one thing, and that is Pete Rose's loyalty to the Cincinnati Reds.
That is correct. Unquestioned.
Uh, just to give a little bit of a recap of the NBA, because there has been, I tell you what, Dennis, a ton of news that
I've been seeing things flying in.
you'll likely have very little input on, which is why it's a shame Bob is singing his heart out at Morgan Wallen, because there's a lot to talk about, and we may talk about some of it more next week, but I have a feeling it won't be very much. Blitz time. Let's see if I can do this in under 3 minutes. James
All
Harden
right, let's do it.
James Harden opted into his $35.6 million option, and he's going to try to be traded from Philadelphia. Josh Hart exercised his near $13 million option to return to the New York Knicks. Harrison Barnes re signed with the Sacramento Kings to a 3 year, $54 million contract. That's a pretty solid contract for Harrison Barnes. He's a really good role player, 3-and-D type of player at this point in his career. And I think the Kings got some pretty decent value out of that one. The Pistons have made two trades today. One was acquiring Joe Harris, basically taking on his $20 million 1 year contract to give the Brooklyn Nets more room to make moves in free agency for themselves. There were some thoughts that the Pistons may be active in this free agency period. Cam Johnson was a name that was thrown out a lot. Jeremy Grant was a name that was thrown out a lot. But it appears that Troy Weaver really wasn't uh, looking to make too many splashy moves this offseason and would instead rather wait for next offseason, where the $20 million that he is acquiring this year for Joe Harris, who in his own right is a 40% three-point shooter, has been struggling with his health, and that's impacted his performance in the past couple years. But if he were to even get to, remotely part of his form back, he can be a very good addition for a Pistons team that needs wing scoring and perhaps be a piece they flip at the deadline. They only paid $110,000 for him. They acquired Joe Harris and two second-round picks in the future for the NBA minimum of $110,000 because you can't give people away for free, Dennis. The Warriors
That's correct.
re-signed Draymond Green to a 4 year, $100 million contract. Now that the
Boo.
now that the Warriors have shipped out Jordan Poole, which is old news at this point, in exchange for Chris Paul, who got to the Wizards via the Phoenix Suns, who traded him for Bradley Beal, essentially. Um, Again, it's a shame Bob isn't here because I'm sure he'd love to talk about Kevin Durant and how Kevin Durant is soft and needs a super team to be able to win an NBA final. And now the Phoenix Suns, even though they have almost no bench, do have a very solid top three with Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal, and Devin Booker, easily going to be one of the hardest backcourts in the NBA to defend against. Back to the present time, the Warriors, like I said, 4 years, $100 million for Draymond Green. He's 33, so we'll see how long he'll actually be productive for in this 4 year contract. Um, so we'll see. We'll see. The Wizards re-signed Kyle Kuzma to a 4 year, $102 million contract. That, Dennis, is what you call an overpay.
It sounds like it to me. It sounds like it.
Granted, the NBA salary cap is going up, so pretty much everything is an overpay now. We're paying role players in today's money what you would have paid star players 10 years ago. So it's sort of one of those things where as the salary cap raises, more and more guys are going to be overpaid, but really they're just being paid market price now. The Pacers signed Bruce Brown, Detroit Pistons legend, to a 2-year, $45 million contract. He made his name as an extremely valuable role player in the NBA Finals, both offensively and defensively. The Dallas Mavericks were able to convince Kyrie Irving to re sign for 3 years, $126 million. We'll see if him and Luka can improve their backcourt chemistry in this coming season. But they're going to have to do a little more to be competitive in the West than just have Luka and Kyrie. The Bucks re-signed Chris Middleton, 3 years, 102 mil. He opted out of a contract that was worth a little bit less per year than that to be able to re-sign with Milwaukee. He's a very critical 3-and-D type of player that the Bucks do need to be able to reclaim their throne atop the Eastern Conference. The Trailblazers re-signed Jeremy Grant to a 4-year, $160 million contract. I am glad the Pistons are not paying Jeremy Grant $40 million because that's more of an overpay than Kyle Kuzma, Dennis. I'm a big Jeremy Grant fan. I liked him when he was in Detroit. We were able to move him for what eventually became Jalen Duren. Uh, but he's a glorified role player, if I'm being perfectly honest. And I'm sure if Bob watches his back, he'll agree. Glorified role player Jeremy Grant should not be making $40 million this year, and I'm glad that Troy Weaver decided not to go after him. I'm almost getting to the end here. The Lakers, Bob will be happy about this one, signing Gabe Vincent from the Miami Heat to a 3-year, $33 million contract. That is a perfect type of contract for a role player of his caliber, so I'll have to give the Lakers some credit. The Nets re-signed Cam Johnson, 4 years, $108 million. This was the move the Nets made subsequently from moving Joe Harris to Detroit. Detroit basically uh, took the cap space that Brooklyn needed to re-sign Cam Johnson. He's had some injury problems. Pistons fans were upset that we didn't get Cam Johnson ourselves, but what's the best ability, Dennis?
Availability, baby. I'll say it
Correct.
for you, Bobby.
Correct. And unfortunately, Cam Johnson has had some injury issues in the past, and paying $26 million a year for yet another role player, the Pistons feel that they could better allocate their resources elsewhere. The Cavaliers signed George Niang, 3 years, $26 million. A very strong role player, sixth or seventh guy off the bench type of guy. That's a quality value signing. The Raptors re-signed Jakob Pertl, 4 years, $80 million. I don't really care too much for Jakob Pertl, so I have nothing more to say. The Pelicans re-signed legend Herb Jones. He's he's one of those guys that you just kind of root for. One, because of his name. Two, because of his story. Herb Jones, congratulations on getting your payday. The Heat signed Josh Richardson, 2 years, 6 mil. Not really a notable signing there. The Lakers also signed Cam Reddish to a 2-year contract with the AAV unknown. He struggled to, really break out and live up to his draft standing when he was drafted in that, massive 3-man class. Zion Williamson, RJ Barrett, Cam Reddish. He's sort of been the third wheel in that Duke class and really hasn't, reached his potential. We'll see if the Lakers are able to unlock it. The Rockets overpay for Fred Van Fleet. Dude is a top
I
15
saw that.
point guard at best. At best, he's somewhere between 12 and 15, and they're going to be paying him uh what? Nearly
Okay.
$30 million, a little over $30 million for Fred Van Vliet.
I'm gonna chime in real quick. I'm
Go
gonna
for it.
just because I had a thought and I think this is a moment which I can interject and maybe even learn something. Is this the equivalent or where does this fall on the scale of Jacksonville paying Christian Kirk?
Right there. I'd say that is
Okay.
almost the
Okay.
equivalent of Jacksonville paying Christian
Because
Kirk.
I saw that contract come through on ESPN and I was like, that's Jacksonville paying Christian Kirk, and I just didn't know if that was accurate to say or not.
Yeah, I think that's almost a perfect
Okay.
analogy, Dennis. That is great
All
callback.
right.
The
There we go.
Lakers re-signed Rui Hachimura to a 3-year, $51 million extension. That's a good signing for them. Rob Pelinka nailed that trade with the Washington Wizards to bring him in. Rui's the type of guy I wanted the Pistons to have on their roster, but alas, he'll be in LA for the next 3 years. The Raptors, in order to replace Fred Van Vliet, signed Dennis Schroeder. Not really too much to say there. I'm sure Lakers fans are finally glad to be rid of him. The Grizzlies signed Derrick Rose. They want him to be both a leader on the court and off the court. I imagine this is the type of guy you bring in to try and straighten out Ja Morant and get him on the straight and narrow. They signed him to a 2 year contract to be a veteran presence in the locker room. The Pistons also acquired point guard Monty Morris from the Washington Wizards. I believe we are trading some second round pick at some point. Uh, the Pistons have a lot of young guards. They don't really have too many veteran guards. This is a type of guy you bring in, maybe run the second offense, and just give some of the younger guys a break when they need it without having an extreme talent drop off, which is what the Pistons have had in recent years. Two more. This was a little longer than 3 minutes just because I didn't realize there were so many contracts.
There's so many.
There were
There's
so
so
many
many.
contracts. I was getting alerts for what felt like an hour straight every 5 minutes earlier today.
We didn't even talk about the draft that happened last week.
Correct. Correct. We'll get there. We'll get there. The
Okay, all right.
Pacers. The Pacers signed Tyrese Halliburton to a max contract extension, and this is where Dennis. I know in the past when you've been irritated with me, you've liked to call me a bit of a sports know-it-all, never wrong, always right. My opinions are never wrong. I know that's a line you sometimes use. Write it down in the history books.
Maybe
Write it down in the history books, Dennis. June 30th, 2023 Pacific. July 1st, 2023 Eastern. I
that's
was
correct.
wrong about Tyrese Halliburton. Dead wrong.
Wow.
Dead wrong.
Wow.
I
Oh
thought.
man, this is unfortunate. The first time that Derek says, on record for the history books that he's dead wrong about something, I'm not even informed enough to be able to rub it in his face and tell him that he's right about being wrong. Bobby, where are you at?
Yeah,
Bobby.
I don't know what Bob's thoughts on Tyrese Halliburton were coming into the NBA draft, but I was dead wrong. I thought there was no way he would have any success in the NBA. He was from Iowa State, and I remember watching Michigan beat Iowa State the year Tyrese Halliburton was drafted. And I was like, there's no shot this dude is going to be a good basketball player. And here he is signing the 5 year max worth up to $260 million, and the Detroit Pistons instead took Killian Hayes. It's a tough look.
Mm.
It's a tough scene. I'm sure Bob, this one hits him right in the heart too. But congratulations to Tyrese Halliburton for proving me wrong. I'm sure you know who I am. And then last but not least, the Grizzlies max extend Desmond Bain for 5 years, $207 million. That might be the overpay of the century, Dennis. That might be one of the worst allocation of resources in NBA history. Don't get me wrong. Desmond Bain is a. I'll even say he's a great player. But to put him on the max extension status, where guys you don't just give max extensions to anybody. One, because of the salary cap, and two, I mean you only have so many you can give. And to give it to Desmond Bain, who is very much not an NBA superstar, is ludicrous. And that's how historically inept and loser franchises like the Memphis Grizzlies stay loser franchises. That is a loser
Yep, yep, yep,
franchise move.
yep.
Loser franchise move. That is all of the NBA news I have. We can briefly talk NBA draft, Dennis. I don't know how much of it you watched, or if you have any teams you even paid attention to. Alls I will
So I
say,
I followed along for the first 20 picks or so.
okay, okay. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know how much you have to say on them. if we want, here's what we can do, Dennis. Since I don't know how much of the analysis you listened to. Excuse me, because it was absolutely brutal. Um, I mean, ESPN's draft coverage for anything not the NFL is horrendous. Let me pull up the NBA draft results, and here's what we're gonna play, Dennis. We're gonna play star role player bust. Star role
Okay.
player
All
bust.
right.
We're gonna have three players, and you said you watched approximately the top 20. I imagine you were just waiting until Cam Whitmore got drafted, if I had to guess.
Correct.
And I know the bachelor party was going on too. Um, so
Yeah,
let's do it.
we were driving down. We were
Okay.
driving down, so we had it like pulled up while we were driving.
So what do we want to start with, Dennis? Do we want to start with superstar, role player, or bust?
Wait, so are we just randomly picking three players and we have to assign them one? How do you want to do it?
I was thinking more so just from the guys there, who do we think is going to be a superstar
Okay.
role player
Okay.
or a bust? Um,
All right, I got you.
or maybe we'll actually do four, just cause why not? Superstar, role player, bust, and diamond in the rough. So who's going to be the guy that was underdrafted and is going to end up making a lot of teams? Um, Sort of like the Nikola Jokic. Who's going to be the Nikola Jokic, perhaps? Even though he's a superstar, but you get the point. Who's the hidden diamond in the rough? So where do we want to
See,
start?
I mean, I guess we just go right down the list of what did you start with there? Did you start with Superstar?
Yeah, we can start with superstar.
All right. All right. See, the problem I'm gonna have, just disclaimer before I get started here, because I'm looking at the list. I'm I'm much more in tune with the college basketball game. And
That's fair.
so
I
number one, number one, I'm gonna have a bit of a bias to the US college basketball players that are not from international origin. And
that's
number two,
that's fair.
there are, as we've seen with players like Luca Garza or etc., players that dominate in college that do not translate to the NBA. And I tend to not really be able to pick up on that. But given those caveats, we will proceed.
Okay. I mean, you don't really have to touch because unfortunately for you, five of the top seven guys were international players
Yeah.
or NBA prep leagues. So fortunately for you, Dennis, my superstar will be one of those top seven who were not a college player. If you want to limit your choices to college players, since that's what you're more comfortable with, by all means go for it. Starting with superstar, I'm gonna go with Scoot Henderson. Uh,
Yeah.
Scoot Henderson, I think the Charlotte Hornets blew it by taking Brandon Miller. Um, Dude is an athletic freak, and with a name like Scoot Henderson, you're destined to be great. And I think Scoot Henderson. I was really hoping the Pistons would have found a way to move up to grab Scoot Henderson. They did not. But that's gonna be my superstar, Victor Wembanyama. Um, Everyone already knows what type of prospect he is. I'm gonna do something that um, it's not necessarily a dark horse superstar, but Scoot Henderson I think has got all the makings of a star player.
Oh gosh. Okay. All right. All right. I'm gonna go a little further down the board. Derek, do you have any guesses? Knowing me as well as you do.
Mm, Dennis, please tell me you're not gonna say Cam Whitmore, superstar.
I am not. I am not. I am not gonna say Cam Whitmore. I think I actually admitted in the chat last Thursday
You
that even
did.
at 20 he might have been overdrafted.
You did.
So
You did indeed.
yeah, yeah. No,
Uh,
I'm
Go
gonna
ahead,
go with.
Dennis.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I'll say you think your superstar is going to be I don't know, Jordan Hawkins.
Not quite. Not quite. Where was he taken?
14th.
Jordan at 14. That's fair. I'm going a little further down the board. I'm a bit of a long shot, I suppose. Marcus Sasser.
Okay, I like that, Dennis.
Marcus Sasser, he's got I don't know, man. I watched a lot of Marcus Sasser in college. Of course, I'm biased. American Conference, blah blah blah. Dude can ball, man. Dude can just straight up ball, and I think that it actually is a skill set that translates well. He's a shooter, and
And
I I'm
importantly,
excited to see him play.
even more importantly, Dennis, he's a Detroit Piston.
Correct, correct.
Is it fair to
Yep.
say Marcus Sasser has that dog in him, Dennis? I know that's a very much
It's
overused. It's a very much overused, washed term now. But if there's anyone that personifies dog, it's Marcus Sasser.
that's the thing. I'm looking down this list here, and I agree with you that it's a bit overused, and I wasn't going to necessarily use that exact term, but I'm looking down this list, and I'm like, none of these guys are superstars. None of these guys are superstars, and I'm like, ooh, Marcus Sasser.
I like it. I like it. I
Ooh.
like it, Dennis. I like it. Let's go with role player next. My role player is going to be Kobe Buffkin. I think he is a
Okay.
really, really,
Yeah.
really strong opportunity to carve out a 3 and D role for himself. He's not really that much of a shot creator. He's not really that much of a slasher, although he does finish well around the rim. But he was easily our best on-ball perimeter defender last year. He took the toughest assignments every single game, and he's only going to get better. He's only going to get stronger. He's one of the younger. Uh, he was a really young sophomore that really could have been a freshman based on his age. And yeah, Kobe Buffkin. He's gonna. I think he's gonna have sort of like a Jordan Poole type of career, where he's has a breakout year, makes bank, and then is able to sort of uh, hopefully build on that towards the end of his career. But I think he'll have a very long, successful career as sort of a Chris Middleton type of player. Maybe doesn't shoot it as well, but defends better.
All right. All right. I think that's fair. Uh, once again, I'll throw out the college caveat here, but I was really intrigued by this particular pick, and I had to gloss over him for the superstar category, but he might fit into role player. I'm going to say Grady Dick.
That was I thought
Um,
you were gonna go there. I agree
yeah, so
100%.
I mean, 6'7", 200 pounds. He's got the size, and he showed flashes when he was at Kansas last year. I I just see him fitting into that role, kind of plain and simple. I think that he has sort of the high floor, but not really, just not really the physical presence and tools that you need to become a superstar in the NBA. So that's why I would throw him out there for that particular category.
I think Dennis, that is a great pick. That is a great pick. For bust, I'm in between two players here, Dennis. I'm in between two players. But I've got to go with the player that you may remember popping up in the group chat the minute he was drafted. Bilal Koulibaly, taken
That's
from
what
the.
I was gonna say. That's what I was gonna say.
Oh
Oh my
no!
gosh.
I took the
Because
only
he's the one who played
international.
with Victor White, right?
Correct. He was the only international player Dennis knew outside of Victor, and now I've stolen
I
it
was gonna
from
say
him.
I heard all the rumblings that he was overrated just because he played with Victor,
And
and he was
oh,
just gonna be a bust.
you know what, Dennis? You can have Bilal then, since I had a second player I wanted to take anyway.
Okay, all
But
right.
yes, I couldn't have said it better myself. I think his draft mystique was boosted by the fact that he was playing with Victor. But very rarely do these guys, these international players that aren't like Luca, for whatever reason, people didn't like Luca coming out of the draft. I loved Luca coming out of the draft. You know who I did not love coming out of the draft? Killian Hayes. That's who I did not love coming out of the draft. Guys who can't shoot coming into the draft that are international players never learned to shoot. I remember when Frank Ntilikina was drafted by the New York Knicks, he couldn't shoot. He's out of the league now. Killian Hayes has been with the Pistons for I think 4 years now, still can't shoot. While Tyrese Halliburton is getting a max contract, Killian Hayes might be out of the league here pretty soon. And I foresee Bilal Koulibaly having a similar trajectory.
Mhm.
Anything further to add, Dennis?
No, you nailed it. You absolutely nailed it. So who's your other one?
My other one is going. Maybe this is a little unfair, but I think Jaime Jaquez was extremely overdrafted at 18. I'm sure the Heat think he's a great Heat culture type of player. Um, but outside of making wacky three pointers, I don't really think he's that
That's so
athletic.
true.
I
That's
don't
so true.
I don't really think he's that athletic. He he played power forward in college, but I don't think he really has the size to compete with the truly great power forwards. Not that you're really expecting the guy you take, 18th in the draft to become a superstar, but I have a feeling Jaime Jaquez is going to be one of those guys that might be out of the league in 4 years.
But Derek, he was well coached. I mean, can you deny Mick Cronin and his coaching?
I mean, when you've got the legendary Hep Cronin coaching Mick Cronin how to
That's
coach,
correct. Correct. You've got two layers of coaching. I mean, this is a coaching onion that we're talking about at this point. It's incredible. I
yeah.
mean,
But yeah,
I,
Jaime,
I just don't know how I just don't know how you deny the fact that he's so well coached, he's got to be a success. But I understand.
but yeah, he's a 6'6" forward, um, who played a lot in the post in college, but I just don't see how at 6'6" he's really going to be able to pull off the same post moves when you're going up against Giannis in the post or Joel Embiid in the post or Aaron Gordon in the post. I just don't see it, working out that well. So we'll see. I've been wrong before, but Jaime Jaquez has got the feel of he's going to be in Europe here in the not so distant future. And then lastly, Diamond in the rough, Dennis. Who do you think is going to be one of those guys, maybe drafted in the late first or somewhere in the second round, that could have a chance to carve out a nice role for himself?
Yeah, so I took a look through the end of the first round and into the second round, just looking for a name that popped at me. That's literally the only process that I went through here, not a deep process by any means. But I think I'm going to go with Colby Jones
Okay.
from Xavier. So he was taken by was that the Kings?
If
Um,
it's Sacramento, yes.
yeah, Sacramento, and with the fourth pick of the second round, out of Xavier. Watched this guy play a lot, of course, at college, and even according to his analysis here, it kind of fits in with what I was thinking. Is just all around, kind of an all around player, not particularly tuned to any skill set, which is good and bad. I think it probably puts a little bit of a cap on your potential, but he also I think has a strong chance of carving out a role for himself, as you said, where hang around the league and maybe exceed that second round expectation.
Yeah. My guy is going to be a guy even further down in the second round, pick
Okay.
51 to the Brooklyn Nets, Jalen Wilson out of
Yep.
Kansas.
Yep.
The reigning
That's a
Big
good one.
12 Player of the Year, a Julius Irving Award winner, shot or was averaging 16 points per game, 8 rebounds, and 2 assists in his last year before entering the draft. Not really that much of a playmaker, but he does shoot it well, 33.7% from beyond the arc. He's going to have to improve that a little bit more to really carve out a role. Um, but this NBA projection that I'm looking at has Josh Hart being a sort of similar comp, and I would agree. Proven winner, proven winner, just like Josh Hart was, has a decent amount of athleticism. He's 6'8", and he's proven to be a willing rebounder. And if you do those sort of things where you play reliable defense, you rebound, you don't really have to be, a game-breaking scorer type of player. So Jalen Wilson, I think, has a chance to be one of those guys that has one of those longer-term uh, careers coming out of the second round.
go.
All right. See, Dennis, I was able to work you into the NBA discussion. Not too
Heck yeah,
bad on
man.
my part.
Hey, all you got to do is start talking about college players, and then I'm there, man.
There we
There we
go.
go.
Uh, Sort of getting to the end here. Again, there was so much, Dennis. I mean, that's what happens when you don't do a
Was
podcast for 3 weeks.
for a
Uh,
month, yeah.
yeah. So the ESPN layoffs, Dennis. I don't know how much you've been paying attention to this throughout the day, but ESPN, for whatever reason, has done like a fantasy draft of firings where they've been throughout the day they releasing like one name every hour. It felt like some of the names.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
you're gonna have to let me in on this a little bit because I don't really have too much knowledge on this.
Yeah, so I don't know how much of this is due to Pat McAfee signing an $85 million contract to take the Pat McAfee show to ESPN. But ESPN, about a month ago, 2 months ago, announced that they were going to be laying off on air personalities. And today is the day they finally released the names of those who will not be being retained. Here is a list of all of the people who are reported to be let go and or not having their contracts renewed. NBA analyst Jeff Van Gundy. I'm sure that's a name you recognize,
Wow,
Dennis, from having watched the NBA playoffs. It
of
was
course.
Mike Breen, Mark Jackson, and Jeff Van Gundy running the premier ESPN basketball coverage. Jeff Van Gundy will be departing. Uh, Jalen Rose will also be leaving ESPN. He was big on NBA Countdown. His role, from what I read in ESPN, had sort of been decreasing. His He had a podcast called Jalen and Jacoby. Jacoby left ESPN last year, so his role was sort of going down anyway. Here's a name you'll know, Dennis: Keyshawn Johnson
Yeah,
of NFL coverage will
correct.
is being released. Susie Colbert, unfortunately, I was a big fan of Susie Colbert on her work on NFL Countdown. Susie Colbert, Dennis, getting let go as well. Steve Young, Dennis, being released by
Wow.
ESPN. Steve Young and Matt Hasselbeck. So they really, for whatever
Oh
reason,
no.
were gutting their football coverage for some reason, uh, because Todd McShay also being let go.
Wow.
Todd McShay being let go, and then probably the last name you'll be maybe a couple more. David Pollock of College Game Day being let go.
Okay.
It was announced last week or 2 weeks ago. I'm sure you saw this. Neil Everett was not going to have his
Yep.
contract renewed. So RIP bartender Jack. That was one of Neil
That's
Everett's
so
go-to
sad.
phases.
Oh, that was the best.
Mm-hmm.
That was the best, man.
So yeah,
Bartender. Jack.
correct. Legendary catchphrase. Will no longer be seen on ESPN. And then last but not least, there's a
Sad.
couple more names out there. Um, you know LaFonso Ellis. He's on the College
Yep.
Game Day crew for basketball. LaFonso Ellis has been there for I think 14 years at ESPN, and he's getting let go. And then last but not least, Bob will get a kick out of this if he watches this back. Death beam pointed at the earth. I want Iguodala. Max Kellerman is being laid off by
Oh
ESPN.
my gosh. Wow. Wow.
Yep.
Wow. That's kind of crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah.
There, this sounds like, here's my question. Is ESPN zigging while everyone else is zagging to the NFL?
So
Everyone wants the NFL coverage, and they're like, you know what? We're just not going to do the NFL.
here's
We're
the thing.
just, don't worry about it.
A lot of the some of the bigger names were big radio. So Jeff Van Gundy, I'm pretty sure,
Yeah.
had his own radio show. Jalen Rose, Keyshawn, and Max co-hosted the three of them a radio show. I'm pretty sure. Um, I'm not sure about some of the other NFL guys, but perhaps maybe 5, 6 guys at a desk is too many for NFL Countdown to have Steve Young and Matt Hasselbeck and Susie Colbert. Maybe ESPN feels they don't need all of them. I'm not entirely sure. Um, but yeah, it's a lot of the names we grew up with, Dennis, will no longer be a part of ESPN.
That is kind of crazy. Wow. Yeah, that's a lot of names, a lot of bigger names too than I was expecting.
Correct. Yeah. Um, there's one guy who is not being fired, and he's going to be my winner of the week. So I'll save that here for a couple of minutes. Last thing, Dennis,
Okay.
then we can get into winners, losers, and right bench baller. The MLB, Dennis.
Oh baby. Save the best for last.
Of course. Dennis,
Where do you
your
want to start, man?
we'll start right here.
All right.
Your Cincinnati Reds are first place in the NL Central. A full game ahead of Milwaukee
Derek,
after
Derek, I never
Milwaukee
thought I'd hear those words again.
after Milwaukee absolutely choked to Pittsburgh tonight.
They did. Yes.
The Cincinnati Reds are standalone in first place, Dennis. Your thoughts?
I disbelief. Utter disbelief. I really don't know. I just don't understand, to be honest with you. I don't understand. I've sat on this podcast specifically before the season started and very much tempered my expectations going into it. There was no reason to believe. Also, shout out Carlos Santana for taking care of the Brewers tonight. That was pretty sweet. Um, Unbelievable game. And then there was a walk off in our game too.
Correct.
The Reds walked it off
That
today.
was an unbelievable game. Spencer's no.
Spencer Steer,
Who tied it up?
Matt
Someone,
McLean
yeah, Matt McLean tied it up and then
with
Spencer
two
Steer
outs in the
walked it
10th.
off. Correct. Correct.
Down two with 2 outs in the 10th. McLean dead center field 2-run jack. And then the Padres tacked on the ghost runner in the top of the 11th. And then we tied it. Should have won the game on Ellie De La Cruz sliding into home
But he
completely
forgot to
safe.
but he forgot to touch home, Dennis.
Did he? I didn't see the clip. I just heard people
That's
arguing that he was
well, he would have been
way, way like there.
he would have been safe had he touched home plate.
Okay. All right. Well, nevertheless, uh, Spencer Steer just takes care of business anyway and just hits it over the freaking left field fence by a mile. So eh, I know it's just one game. This team, man, is fun.
Electric.
They're fun. Ever since ever since really Matt McLean got brought up, that was one of the big turning points. And then especially after Ellie De La Cruz got brought up, it's young, it's talented, it's energized. They were talking about this on the broadcast today. I was listening to the Reds radio broadcast announcers. They were talking about how the Padres have all of this talent and all of these big names and all of these contracts, but right now they just don't have any confidence
Correct.
up and down that line. You read their lineup, it's Manny Machado, Xander Bogaerts, Juan Soto, and they're losing games left and right.
Yeah, they're
Uh,
stain. They're stain. Certified stain.
and we're and the Cincinnati Reds are the exact opposite of that right now, which is one of the most exciting things I've been able to say about a baseball team in Cincinnati in a very, very long time.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll ask you this, Dennis.
Yeah,
How
shoot.
long will Cincinnati be able to out hit their poor starting pitching?
That's a great question. And I mean, it's a proposition in which you have to assume at some point that the bottom's going to fall out, right? Like
Not
that.
necessarily that the bottom's going to fall out, but more so regression to the mean.
Well, sure. I mean, that's a good way to put it as well. There's a clear flaw, right? There's
Yes.
there's in at least in my mind, there's a clear flaw in this roster.
And that is
I would
starting pitching.
say, and it's starting pitching. And as I've preached over and over again, The bullpen, I believe, and this is my prediction, will become an increasing problem
Mm,
because of the poor starting pitching and what I would say poor management on the part
yes.
of David Bell. I think maybe I haven't given him enough slack on previous episodes and in previous conversations because sometimes your hands are tied when the starter
Blows
just
it.
can't get deep into a game and just can't. But at the same time, I do think some of the responsibility falls onto him. I mean, you just you just have to make smart decisions for the length of an entire season. And I understand that you want to win every single game you can, but you have to try to win the most you can in 162, and that's a
Correct.
really difficult thing to do. And sometimes I don't think that he has a good vision of that. But nevertheless, to answer your question, I don't know. I'm expecting it any moment. I am enjoying this ride while it's lasting. This has been a lot of fun. I mean, we had the 12 in a row, which just to talk about that game for a second, I don't
Sure.
know if you, oh my gosh, the the last Friday night against Atlanta
That was a heck of a
when
series.
oh my gosh, we started down 5-0. I was tracking on my phone because I actually was at the White Sox game that night and was tracking it on my phone. I was like, oh crap, it's like the streak is over. It's 5-0 Braves in the first. And not meant to be. Ellie De the Cruz hits for the cycle by the sixth inning, dude.
Correct.
Hits for the
Asinine.
cycle by the sixth inning.
Correct.
Oh my gosh. And this team right now offensively can come back at any moment, anytime, and beat anybody. The problem, as you've mentioned, is going to be the starting pitching. We currently have no Hunter Green, no Nick Lodolo. The encouraging thing was a good start tonight out of Graham Ashcraft. Finally, because he's been cheeks for the
Correct.
lack of a better term.
Correct.
Um, and we've needed him. So just look. I mean, just look at the names that we're trotting out there. It's Luke Weaver. It's I think Ben Lively is still being trotted out there. He's been okay. Uh,
Yeah, I can get you
the
some
the
names.
the the best
Abbott's
starting
been
pitcher on
good.
this roster is Abbott.
Yeah.
Exactly. He's the best starting pitcher on this roster. Nobody knew who he was 4 weeks ago.
Correct. Correct. Yeah.
Andrew Abbott. It's
Yeah. I'm looking here, Dennis. Cincinnati's team ERA. I'm still trying to find the actual starter versus bullpen ERAs, but their team ERA 501. 501 ranks 27th out of 30th in the MLB, yet they're above 500 in first place in the NL Central. So it'll be interesting. There's no doubt, there's no question in my mind, Dennis, that the offense will remain electric throughout the season. Perhaps some of these young guys, as teams get better scouting reports and are able to identify more weaknesses, because you do have an extremely young lineup. So I'm sure there's lots of data to be had. But the bottom line is, the Reds are a very fun team to watch right now. And as much as it hurts me to say it, Dennis, I am happy for you that the
yes.
Reds are not complete Dookie stain. Um,
Oh my gosh.
I am happy for you because I remember what it was like to watch my young core come together over the course of 2014 to 2016 before it culminated in the World Series. So I am happy for you.
I just wasn't expecting it. And I know it's a long season. There's a long way to go. There's a lot that can happen. There's clear flaws on this team, as we've both talked about already. But the fact that we're even here right now after last season, I mean, taking the context that we started 3-23 a year ago,
Correct.
3-23, to be 6 games over 500 and first in the NL Central at this point this year is just, I still can't comprehend it.
Yeah. Yeah. I still cannot find starter ERA. And it's very annoying.
Derek, do I ask my question now or do I wait and give you a chance to talk about the Chicago Cubs?
Give me a chance. Give me a chance to talk about the Cubs. So the Cubs,
All right, we'll circle back. Let's
the
do that.
the Cubs are still the same exact frustrating team they've been all year. We clawed and fought and bled and scratched our way to one game under 500, and then immediately proceeded to lose four in a row. Um, so that sucked. But I tell you what, the 9 of the past 11 games before that, taking 2 out of 3 from Baltimore, taking all 6 from Pittsburgh. Uh, those were fun times. Those were fun times. Taking 2 out of 3 from the Giants was fun. Unfortunately for the Cubs, they have a very similar problem to the Cincinnati Reds. And that is, outside of Justin Steele and Marcus Stroman, they don't really have anyone else in the starting rotation. Uh, as much as Drew Smiley has been relatively effective this year, you can only have so many soft tossing starting pitchers in your rotation before it starts to backfire on you. And Drew Smiley really only has a fastball and a fastball and a curveball. And when teams are just sitting on his curveball and forcing him to throw his fastball over the plate, you don't get good results. You don't get good results. Not to mention, you have the guaranteed loss, Jameson Tyone, coming up every 5 days, where you're quite literally throwing a game away because he's so ineffective. That sucks. And it remains to be seen what kind of season Kyle Hendricks will have. He's been good. He's been a quality start machine pretty much ever since his first start back, where he got touched up a little bit. But since then, he's been back to form. But if the Cubs are really serious about trying to be competitive in a relatively weak NL Central this year, they're going to have to find a way to make a move to pick up a third starter. Um, because I was talking about this with my brother. You don't need to be 5 deep in the rotation once you reach the playoffs. In actuality, you only need to be 3 deep. It's nice to have a fourth guy, um, but Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola pitched 59% of the starts in
Mm-hmm.
Philadelphia's World Series run last year.
Yep.
59%
Yep.
was Aaron Nola and Zach Wheeler. And then Ranger Suarez tossed a couple times, if I remember correctly. And there might have been one other guy who started a couple games in the who started a game in the Houston series. But outside of that, you have a 3 game series for the wild card. You have a 5 game series for the DS, a 7 game series for the CS, and a 7 game series for the World Series. There's a chance. I mean, there's a very real possibility. You only need 3 starting pitchers to reach the NLCS. And in order for the Cubs to have any chance, they're going to have to find a true third starting pitcher. Don't get me wrong. Kyle Hendricks is good, but he's not. I don't think you want to roll out Kyle Hendricks if you can roll out Max Scherzer, for example. You know? Or if you can roll out Justin Verlander, for example. I don't think Kyle Hendricks is really striking
So,
fear into the opponent's heart.
okay, based on that, I gotta ask you, and I agree with you. Is that something that you want the Chicago Cubs to do this year? Because
Yes,
I've had this debate
very much
now.
so.
I've had this
Very
debate
much so.
because you believe that you're going to win the Central.
Yes. Yes.
Oh,
Yes, I think I think
oh,
I think
oh.
I think the Cubs could win the Central. But
Okay.
but they've got to not be throwing away starts every 5th day when Jameson Tyone comes to pitch. I mean, you just that's like 30 games that you're guaranteeing a loss for whenever he pitches. So here's what I want the Cubs to do. They're not going to do it obviously, cuz why would they? The Cubs should try to package Drew Smiley and a couple other players, Matt Mervis, maybe a couple high profile minor leaguers, for Max Scherzer and Pete Alonso. If the Mets continue to slide, I know you saw what Steve Cohen said at his press conference, Dennis. I know you saw that he said essentially that they might become sellers at the deadline if their record doesn't improve. If the Cubs added Pete Alonso and Max Scherzer, Dennis, there's no question in my mind they could win the Central. Can they do it right now? I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced.
I don't understand what planet you're on that you think the New York Mets are going to give you Max Scherzer and Pete Alonso for a package that includes Drew Smiley and some other players.
Well, because Drew Smiley, Dennis, for your information, Drew Smiley has a
I don't care what it is. That's
3.96 ERA.
oh man, I want some of whatever you've been smoking tonight.
Dennis, listen, we have you have to understand, Dennis. The Mets traded us Pete Crow Alexander for Javier Baez. One of their top farm prospects for a dude barely hitting 225. And then they immediately proceeded to cut him loose and let the Tigers sign him. The Mets are fleeceable, Dennis. The Mets are fleeceable.
Well, I mean, then, all the power to you. If if you believe that that's going to happen, then, I'm here for you.
Let me live in my fantasy world, Dennis.
Yeah, I'll let you live in your fantasy world. I'm gonna bring us back to, planet Earth here for a second and have a real debate, which is, whether or not in a similar fashion I've debated this for the Cincinnati Reds. And my answer, I think I've come to the conclusion, is that I don't mess with what this team is too much. I mean, if you can get, for whatever reason, a starting pitcher for somebody who's not on the active roster that you're willing to part with, maybe. But my honest take is probably that this team is not winning a World Series this year. Not this year.
Probably not.
So why don't you write it out, see where this goes? And as you said, I'm still waiting for the starting pitching, to send us on a losing streak that, kind of diminishes our chances. But see where it goes and do your free agent signing and trading, etc., in the offseason after you have Joey Votto off the books, you have Mike Moustakas off the books, and you have a lot of additional monetary incentives
Well,
to throw around
will
to
Ken
potential
Griffey be
veteran
coming
players.
off the books?
I think he has one more year.
Oh, one more year. Okay, okay, okay.
Yeah.
Dennis, here's a question I'll ask. Wouldn't
Rather
it
than a 1 year rental.
wouldn't it be great, Dennis, to have a pitcher like Luis Castillo?
Yes. And here's the funny thing about that is I even mentioned that possibility. I literally said this. The only reason that the only way in which I would be perfectly fine making a move at the deadline is if it's for a Luis Castillo style player where you have the additional year on the contract. And I don't know who that is at the current moment. I have to do some
Yeah, I don't
digging.
know.
It's certainly not him. But it would be great. It would be so good. I'm looking at this rotation right now. Active: Graham Ashcraft, Andrew Abbott, Brandon Williamson, and Luke Weaver. And I'm assuming a bullpen day
Yeah, at least until Hunter
because
Green comes back.
Hunter Green, Nick Lodolo out, Ben Lively, Connor Overton, and Justin Dunn are currently uh on the depth chart but listed on the injured list.
And Lucas Sims has essentially been demoted to bullpen now, hasn't he?
Lucas Sims has always been out of the bullpen.
Oh, has he? Oh,
But
okay,
yeah,
okay, okay.
yeah, yeah.
Dennis, your thoughts on Ian Jabot?
Farmer, Derek. Ian Chabot's been pretty solid.
Has he actually? That disgusts me.
Yes, he's been pretty solid. I'm not gonna lie to you.
What
It's
about
crazy. I saw Alec Mills came out of the pen the other day, and I almost barfed.
wait, the Alec Mills, as in
The Alec Mills.
Cubs no hitter throwing
Yes,
legend Alec Mills?
yes, that's the one, Derek. That's the one. The goggles and all.
I'm pretty sure the Cubs dumped Alec Mills when the Reds shelled him in Cincinnati last year. I'm pretty sure that was the beginning of the end for Alec Mills.
Oh my gosh, Vladimir Gutierrez on the injured list.
Oh
Forgot.
no, oh no.
Unbelievable. Could we get him back in time for a run for the World Series?
What about Raver San Martin?
Also on the injured list.
Oh
60
no,
day.
oh no. Dennis, wouldn't it be
Buck
great?
Farmer
What
holding
about
down the
Buck?
fort.
Holding down the fort?
He's yeah, he's out of the pen every other night.
Gross.
Every other night.
Gross. Wouldn't it be great to have someone like CNL Perez, Dennis?
See, I sent you guys that when they showed up at the Baltimore game the other night, and I was beside myself. Unbelievable. Oh my
But yeah.
gosh. No, he's been good though.
Im-
He's been pretty good.
Imagine a 1-2
I think
punch of Alexis Diaz and Rizal Iglesias, Dennis.
Derek, you know who we should trade for?
Let me
Bobby, I
guess.
hope you're listening.
Let me
Bobby, I
guess.
hope you're listening.
Let me guess. Give me a team.
We just talked about them.
Seattle?
No, Ciano Perez.
Oh,
I'm not
Baltimore?
not him. Yeah.
Ooh, who would you trade for on Baltimore? That they would give you considering they have their own playoff aspirations this year. I have no idea. I have no idea. Dean Kramer?
Dean Kramer,
Dean
baby.
Kramer?
Dean Kramer. He's been good.
He
He's been
got
actually
shelled.
good.
I don't
It's
know if you saw,
unbelievable.
but
Oh,
he
did
just
he?
got shelled for
Oh
7
no.
earned.
Oh no.
Wyatt picked him.
Oh no.
Big Boy picked him up on Sunday, and I think he pitched either yesterday or today and got
He
absolutely
pitched
shelled.
tonight.
Yeah, he got
Yeah, he definitely
absolutely
pitched tonight because
cooked.
I was listening to a betting podcast this morning when I was driving for the games tonight, and they talked about Dean, and they were talking about how he's been really good.
He has been. I said it a couple weeks ago that he was
Yeah.
quietly a very effective pitcher, and he was racking up quality starts like nothing.
Well, hey,
Unfortunately,
now's the perfect time to trade for him because he just got shelled, so they're going to be down on him now.
correct. 7 earned, 2 dongs in 3 innings for Dean. Unfortunately,
Against which lineup?
the Twins, who
No. Yeah.
I don't think they're a home run or bust type of team, if I recall
Yeah.
correctly. Um, yeah. Unfortunate for Dean. He had been doing really well too, really well.
No. No.
But yeah,
It'll be interesting. I think we just sit tight, just ride this out. Don't mess with it too much. But if anything, I think it's going to be starting pitching, and that's the clear weakness of this team.
yeah. I don't know who you guys have to close out before the All Star break, which is going to be very soon. So hopefully we'll be able to do an All Star break
So it's
preview in the next couple weeks. But I know the Cubs are going to finish this series um, with the Guardians, who we really need to sweep. We've got to sweep the Guardians. They are trash. Then we have 4 games with Milwaukee, which could be season defining. And then we close with a 3 game series with the Yankees. Aaron Judgeless
yep,
Yankees.
correct. All right, that's really interesting. Yeah. So we have the Padres at home this weekend, which we took game one tonight, and then we go to Washington, and then we go for three at Milwaukee right before
Oh,
the break.
wow.
So, and I'll be there on that Friday night
Yeah.
for that first game of that series. So I'm excited for that one. That could be also pretty defining here. So,
Then, speaking of Aaron Judge, I, toes are problematic. I got turf
yeah,
toe my senior year of high school playing soccer, and that messed me up for 2 weeks. I can't imagine what a man of his size running full speed and banging his toe on the wall could do to a guy like him. Because
correct.
the fact that he's only just now, I think, playing catch is pretty crazy that it's been causing him that much of an issue. And also very unfortunate that we won't get to see him in the home run derby.
Correct. Yeah. Very, very unfortunate. And yeah, you're absolutely right. The toes can really suck.
Yeah. But yeah,
Okay.
that's you got. Were you gonna say something?
Yeah, I got to quickly. I know we've been going a while. I got to quickly get your thoughts on the question that I proposed earlier.
Ah, yes, 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 yes.
And to fill everyone listening to this, and hopefully you're still with us at this point in, I asked Derek to please give his thoughts on whether or not Cincinnati, the city, is the most exciting slash fun city to be a sports fan of at the current time. So that would be Bengals, that would be Reds, and that would include FC Cincinnati, which we haven't talked about on this pod, but is currently just raking up the wins in the MLS.
Who Cincinnati stole from Detroit, might I add. Dennis,
So everyone keep in mind the fact that this answer might have a tiny bit of saltiness in it. That's what I'm saying.
they're up there. But I have to say, at this exact moment in time, Denver is the place to be. Even though the Broncos blow and the Rockies blow,
And the Rockies blow.
but you've got two championships in back-to-back years. You got the Avs last year and then the Nuggets this year. I mean,
Uh,
I mean, they get to celebrate two titles, Dennis, and the Nuggets aren't going anywhere, and the Avs aren't going
okay,
anywhere.
okay, you're right about that. However, I think I don't know. You're right about that. I think there is a difference though, which is it sounds stupid to say, but I think there's a difference between excitement and anticipation and we won a championship.
Okay, anticipation. I'll put Cincinnati. It's I can't
Okay.
really. I'll put Cincinnati up in the top two. Maybe there's another city out there for anticipation of excitement. Because I'm not sure what. There aren't really too many feelings that can beat the excitement of championship parades. But yes, there's two different types of excitement. There's excitement of our teams are awesome, we win championships. That's Denver. Then you have our teams are awesome, we might be winning championships here in the next few years, and that's Cincinnati. So I'll give you that. It's one of the most anticipatory, exciting sports towns. Yes.
All right. Thank you. That's all I'm looking for. We're on the up and up, however you want to say it.
Yes.
Uh things are, much brighter than they ever have been across the board, and it's just an exciting time, and that's how I would phrase it, I suppose.
Correct. Last two things, because I almost forgot to mention them. Aroldis Chapman, Dennis,
Yep.
has
Yep,
been
Aroldis.
traded.
Not to the Cincinnati Reds.
Unfortunately, no homecoming, no return of the king, Aroldis. But Aroldis going to the Texas Rangers, he's really had a really awesome bounce back year after his disastrous last season with the
Yeah,
Yankees.
yes.
Um, stock up or stock down on Will Smith?
Ooh.
That was my
Down?
first thought. Yeah, I feel like it would be
Down?
slightly down because
Yeah.
if you have, let's say you're in the ninth and you're gonna get lefty righty lefty, I'd go to Aroldis.
Aroldis. Yeah. It's just another good option there.
Yeah, it's sort of like what
Yeah.
they can essentially do what Baltimore's got with Cano and Bautista. Uh, Obviously
Yep.
not as dynamic as Cano and Bautista, but they have the flexibility now to play matchups. I think so. I agree
Yeah, I
with
would say
you.
down.
I agree with you. And then you mentioned it. I can't remember if it was in the beginning of the pod or right before the pod, but Shohei Ohtani has hit his 15th home run in
Oh, yeah.
June and is the first to 30 this season. He was robbed of an MVP last year because the voters got erections for hitting lots of home runs in a Mickey Mouse stadium. And now Shohei Ohtani is saying, screw ya. I'm going to be paid $1 billion this offseason, and whoever wants me, come get me, because I'm going to break all the records this year.
What was it
90,
480
yes,
90 feet?
something crazy.
92 feet?
Something crazy. Yeah. Yeah. Over his past 24 games, he's hitting 419 with 14 homers and 28 RBI. Absolutely absurd. Absolutely absurd.
Ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Imagine if he hit 64 home runs this year. Or
And
63,
and
63, excuse me.
and strikes out like, oh, I don't know how many, over
He
100 batters, 150 batters.
Yeah, what he is doing is unprecedented. Here's where I'm going to toot my own horn a little bit, Dennis. I remember Shohei's first year coming into the league. I came out to Arizona for vacation and got to see a spring training game with the Angels where Shohei Ohtani was playing. And I knew then and there that Shohei Ohtani was going to be an awesome player in the league, and I told my mom to make sure to get a picture of him on her camera to mark the day that we saw Shohei Ohtani for the first time in person. Uh, Dude is electric, and all the haters out there. Here's a question for you, Dennis. Could Shohei Ohtani become the LeBron James of the MLB in terms of how polarizing he is as a player? Because it feels like the media
Hmm.
the media rides him pretty hard. And as I love it, I'm a big Shohei fan, so I don't mind the constant talk about Shohei Ohtani and all the amazing things he's doing. But I get the sense that he might
No, I see your
be
point.
so good that people get sick of being exposed to him like they were LeBron James.
I think it's very possible. I think a lot of it might have to do with where he ends up next.
I was just
I
about to
think that
say,
that's a
if he
big
becomes a
factor.
Yankee, he's
Oh
dead
my
to me.
gosh, yes, he's going to be
Dead to me.
polarizing. Yep, that's exactly right. I think there are certain sentiments around specific MLB teams that if he were to end up on one of them,
Good point.
that would make him much, much, much more polarizing than he is as an LA Angel.
Correct.
Um, because I have no ill will to the LA Angels, and
Right.
so sure, it might get a little annoying that the media, is
Glazing.
on him all the
Constant
time.
glazing. Yes.
Correct. But I also don't blame him for that necessarily
Right.
because it's not his fault. He's just really good. And
Correct.
so, but I might blame him for that if I didn't agree with the team that he decided to go to.
Correct.
And like
Correct.
that, I would have a little more stake in that. So I see your argument for him becoming polarizing. I think it very much depends on where he goes next.
Agreed. Well, Dennis, we're running it an hour 47 currently.
Maybe.
I mean, that's what happens when you take 2 weeks off, Dennis, and force us to keep pushing back the 50th episode, and then Bob decides he doesn't
There,
want to show up.
can we go for longer than Morgan Wallen did tonight?
I
I don't
mean,
know. I'm guessing he went about 3 hours,
I'm
but
guessing
maybe
he
not.
went about 3 hours, if I had to guess. I've never been to a concert before, so I actually have no idea how long a country set list would be. Um, but I mean, my voice gets tired after the hour 30 we usually do every week. I can't imagine singing for 2.5, 3 hours.
Yeah,
So I
exactly.
guess
He's also had some issues with his vocal cords and stuff. So, maybe
correct,
he's dialed it back.
correct.
Maybe we're
Maybe,
already over.
maybe he's letting the fans do a lot of the singing. I feel like that's
That's
a
right.
genius way to get through. Just holding out the mic, letting the fans take it away. Bob out there
Last
belting.
night, I can't remember. Sorry.
Dennis, you're gonna get us copyright struck by Morgan
I know. I was
Wallen.
going to say, that's why that's why I've got to
Correct.
extend the microphone every two
Correct.
words.
Correct.
Yeah.
Dennis, right bench baller, winners and losers. No garbage time takes your money this week because Bob isn't here. But I will make sure to put it in the Excel sheet that we all missed a week this week to make sure that his absence is accounted for, like I usually do for you, Dennis. So I got your back on this one. Dennis, your winner of the week.
Yeah, my winner of the week, I think my winner and loser this week are a little bit weak, I'll be honest, but I'm going to say walk-off home runs. Walk-off home runs. We've seen several of them. And also I'll just extend it actually. Just baseball. I feel like
It's finally
I'll take a
baseball's
little
time
bit
to
of a
dominate. All the other
It's
major
baseball's
sports are
time to
done.
nominate, and I think that this year has been more exciting than years past, and I've noticed that. So a little bit of props to some of the rule changes. I think that to some extent they're going to have some effectiveness, and we're starting to see it. So uh, I'll give a little bit of credit where credit is due. I still don't love all of them, but I think baseball has gotten more exciting, and if that's the ultimate outcome, I'm okay with it.
My winner of the week, Kendrick Perkins. I alluded to him earlier when I talked about the ESPN layoffs. Somehow, Kendrick Perkins and his bumbling, stumbling, mumbling, dumb idiot brain are still employed by ESPN, and gosh darn it, he might even be due for a promotion at this point since they're letting go of their NBA analysts. So yeah, Kendrick Perkins, with all of his stupid, ridiculous takes and incoherent blabbering, congratulations on surviving the ESPN layoffs.
Derek, the day that I'm gonna sob is when is the day that there's no more Scott Van Pelt. That's who you tune in to watch on ESPN. At least
Dennis,
that I mean,
I mean, let's not even think about that right now.
I
I
know
like to think
it's
SVP's got a lot more good years left in him,
he
but
does, man. He's got to. He's got to.
there's an end of the road for everyone. Let's hope SVP's isn't anytime soon, Dennis. You are absolutely
It's,
correct. Your
I'm glad
loser
we
of the
agree on
week.
that. My loser of the week. I think this fits in here. We alluded to it earlier. I'm gonna say Cam Whitmore. Uh, he was projected by a lot of people to be a pick 4, 5, 6. He falls to 20 in the Houston Rockets. Not only do you fall to 20, but probably not the situation that you wanted to be in unless you were a top 5 pick.
Correct.
And uh, based on what I've seen, I pulled up some of the statistics from last year. In terms of points per game, he was fourth on the team at Villanova last year. Averaged 12.5 points a game, just over 5 rebounds, less than assists per game. I I just didn't see anything personally out of him that suggested to me massive future talent. And so that's why I wasn't necessarily surprised that he fell, and I wasn't particularly hurt that he did. But all the best to him, and hopefully turns out for the best. But it seemed like he probably got drafted way later than he was expecting, and so from his perspective, I'm gonna go loser.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I saw a lot pre-draft that the
A lot of
Pistons
hype. Yep,
were expected
a
to
lot of hype.
take him. And then there was a combination of rumors from poor workouts to injury concerns and
Mm,
long term health concerns. I don't know if the answer was ever revealed, but basically everything I saw online was circulating around some sort of long term injury concerns that weren't worth warranting a top, lottery pick to end up taking him. My loser of the week. This is a bit of old news. Actually, it would have been last Thursday. Rob Manfred. Rob Manfred is my loser, Dennis, because I don't know if you saw this.
isn't he always?
Yes, but this time it's because he finally admitted that giving the Astros immunity in the sign stealing scandal was, quote, not his best decision. Thank you, Rob.
What's it matter now?
It doesn't. It doesn't, but it's just
Which is why he's a loser.
correct. Correct. Because for whatever reason, in his genius big brain, he thought that at the time, giving them immunity was the right thing to do. And then 6 years later, he's like, yeah, probably shouldn't have done that. Freaking idiot. We hate you, Rob Manfred, even if you did make the game better by instituting a pitch clock and banning the shift.
Jay Monahan 6 years from now. Maybe shouldn't have done that.
Well, we'll see. I mean, with those purse prizes, Dennis,
Well,
some of the players
it's
make
going to
them
be
big.
better for the game of golf. It's
Correct.
going to be better for the game of golf. It's not going to be better for him if he's forced to resign, but he may have weathered that storm somehow.
True. Your right bench baller, Dennis.
My right bench baller, that's a perfect segue. I'm going to the world of golf. We mentioned him early on in the show. Wyndham Clark, Derek. Wyndham Clark wins the US Open, albeit on the hands of a little bit of luck from Rory McIlroy not being able to make a single putt. But I pulled up some statistics. Wyndham Clark has been one of those guys who's just been on the tour. If I'm being honest, maybe you've heard his name before. I had, but not for any particular reason. He's played in officially 138 events. He's had two wins on the PGA Tour, both this year, the Wells Fargo and the U.S. Open. So, shout out to Wyndham Clark for turning it on this year and getting his first major and his second ever PGA Tour victory was the U.S. Open. And hats off to that guy.
I mean, he's a major champion. They can never take it away from him, Dennis.
They can't. They can't take it away.
My right bench baller is a man who has cost me a lot of pain, and it seems that for every good thing he does two stupid, dumb, idiot things to negatively counter it. Nick Madrigal, Dennis. Nick Madrigal has been a thorn in my side all year. He'll hit a single and then immediately get thrown out trying to steal second. He'll come up with runners on second and third with two outs and try to lay down a bunt because he forgot how many outs there were. He does all sorts of dumb things. But the fact of the matter is, ever since being called up in the last 15 games after we sent him down to AAA Iowa, he is hitting 375 with a 444 on base percentage, with 5 stolen bases, 6 walks, and he just hit his first home run as a Cub
Wow.
in the
Wow.
previous game. So Nick Madrigal has 3 career home runs, hit his first as a Cub yesterday, now with at the time of this upload. And gosh darn it, has been one of the most productive players in the last 2 weeks. For a guy that in his first 8 games since getting called up had not hit a ball into the outfield in the air. So yeah, credit where credit's due. Nick Madrigal earning himself the right bench baller of the week.
There you go. There you go. Mark it down. Nick Madrigal.
Yeah, he's a bum though. Don't get me wrong. I mean, don't get it twisted. He's a bum. Other than that, Dennis, I think we've covered basically
Man, we
everything.
covered everything. Everything under the sun.
We are pushing 2 hours. We're at 1 hour 57 minutes. Bob, you should have been here. Uh, can't blame you for going to Morgan Wallen, even though I don't give a crap about the guy, because I don't give a crap about country music. But I know how important he is to you and
Wow.
Dennis.
Wow.
I know how important
That's
he is to you and Dennis, and I hope you had a great time. Dennis, do you have the socials down? This is
oh
this
my
is your
gosh,
chance
hold
for
on.
redemption.
Oh
It's your
my
chance
gosh,
for
hold on. I
redemption.
do.
Take a second to
So
collect yourself.
for sure the YouTube. YouTube is where you're gonna want to find this episode. Hopefully you're already there if you're watching this. That would be at Garbage Time Takes.
Correct. Correct.
The Instagram
Uh-huh.
is, I believe, also Garbage Time Takes,
That would be correct.
which because of character limits on Twitter at Garb Time Takes.
Correct, Dennis. You have nailed it.
And that's what we got, baby. That's what we got.
You've nailed
Okay.
it, Dennis. Redemption has been achieved. Balance in the world has been restored. Catch us
Winner
on
character limits.
and
Character
website,
limits.
Dennis.
That would be Garbage Time Takes.
Correct. Correct. You nailed it. Retribution, reclamation, resurrection. I don't know how many other R words I can think of. Uh, but yeah, thanks so much for watching. It'll remain to be seen by the time you're watching this. The title will either be episode 50 or episode 49 and 2/3. We'll see. Uh,
I say we could get an episode 50 in by, September. That'd be probably
I
pretty great.
I would think so. But yes, thanks again so much for watching. We appreciate all the support. Hit the like, comment, subscribe. Tell us what you want to see in next week's episode, perhaps, assuming we have one. Maybe we'll push it up a day, Dennis. If you need an extra day Thursday, let us know. But yeah, thanks so much for watching. We appreciate it. Hopefully Bob will be here next week. Without further ado, in 3.
Two. Peace.
Peace.